Eagle brand sweetened condensed milk is the magic ingredient to chewy cookie bars you make and bake in one pan.
Pour in the Eagle brand. Whip up creamy ice cream. It's lickety-split and always a hit when you pour in the Eagle brand.
First, it's in your coffee, your desserts, your favorite recipes. A thick, creamy staple that has found its way into pantries across the world. But do you really know what's inside? Condensed milk isn't just a sweetened dairy product, it's a marvel of industrial food processing, a relic of war, and a product shaped by necessity. Long before grocery store aisles were stocked with endless cans of condensed milk, fresh milk had a major problem. It spoiled quickly. Before refrigeration, dairy farmers struggled to keep milk from turning rancid, especially in warmer climates. That meant milk had to be consumed almost immediately or it was wasted. But in 1856, one invention changed everything. Gail Bordon, an American inventor and businessman, was obsessed with one idea: finding a way to make milk last longer without refrigeration. His solution: remove most of the water and add sugar to preserve it. Thick, shelf-stable milk that wouldn't spoil. It could be canned, transported, and stored for months, even years. At the time, it was revolutionary. But condensed milk didn't just stay in the hands of everyday consumers. It quickly became a wartime necessity. During the American Civil War, the Union Army needed a reliable way to feed soldiers. Fresh milk wasn't an option. It would turn sour before it even reached the front lines. But condensed milk? It was portable, nutritious, and packed with calories. Soldiers carried cans in their rations, using it for everything from coffee to baking to eating it straight from the tin. It became a lifeline. After the war, demand skyrocketed. Soldiers had developed a taste for it, and when they returned home, they wanted more. By the late 1800s, Bordon's condensed milk company was booming, with factories expanding across the US. The product wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But it wasn't just the United States. Condensed milk spread across the globe. In Europe, it was a game changer for food storage, especially in places where fresh milk was scarce. In Asia, it became a key ingredient in traditional drinks and desserts, from Thai iced tea to Vietnamese coffee. And in developing nations, it became a crucial substitute for fresh dairy in regions where refrigeration was still unreliable. Over time, major food corporations saw an opportunity. Nestlé, one of the largest food companies in the world, began producing its own version of condensed milk, dominating markets from Latin America to Southeast Asia. Today, millions of cans are consumed worldwide, with factories operating 24/7 to keep up with demand. But with mass production came questions. What was really inside these cans? Was condensed milk still the same simple product Bordon had created, or had modern food science transformed it into something else entirely? One thing is certain: condensed milk is no longer just milk and sugar. The version you buy today has been refined, processed, and altered in ways that would have been unthinkable a century ago. So, what's really in that can? And is it as safe as food companies want you to believe? The answers might surprise you. The journey of condensed milk begins long before it reaches the can. It starts in sprawling dairy farms, where cows are milked in staggering numbers, sometimes thousands at a time. But these aren't the quaint, picturesque farms you might imagine. Modern dairy production is a massive, industrialized operation designed for one thing: efficiency. Every day, millions of gallons of milk are extracted from dairy cows through a relentless system of automation and high-tech machinery. On large-scale factory farms, cows don't roam freely in open pastures. Instead, they spend their lives confined to massive barns or feedlots, where their milk production is carefully controlled through a mix of science, technology, and, in some cases, artificial intervention. A single dairy cow can produce up to 7 gallons of milk per day, but that doesn't happen naturally. The dairy industry has spent decades perfecting the process of maximizing milk yield. It starts with selective breeding. Over generations, cows have been bred specifically for higher milk output, often at the expense of their overall health. Modern Holstein cows, the most common dairy breed, produce nearly 4 times more milk than they did a century ago. But that kind of production comes at a cost. To keep milk flowing, dairy cows are subjected to a strict cycle of impregnation, birth, and milking. A cow must give birth to start producing milk, which means most dairy cows are artificially inseminated just months after their previous pregnancy. Once the calf is born, it's separated from its mother, usually within hours. the reason every drop of milk is considered too valuable to be wasted on the calf. Instead, calves are fed formula or other milk substitutes, while their mother's milk is diverted straight into the dairy system. Milking itself has become a fully mechanized process. Instead of farmers manually extracting milk, modern dairies use automated milking machines that attach directly to the cow's udders. These machines use vacuum suction to draw out milk in rapid succession, allowing each cow to be milked in just minutes. Some industrial-scale farms operate massive rotary milking parlors, where up to 100 cows at a time stand on a constantly rotating platform, hooked up to machines that milk them as they move through the cycle. But pushing cows to these extremes comes with consequences. High milk production takes a physical toll, often leading to painful conditions like mastitis, an udder infection that can cause swelling, fever, and extreme discomfort. To combat infections, cows are frequently given antibiotics, which eventually make their way into the milk supply. In some countries, traces of these antibiotics have even been detected in commercial dairy products. Hormones are another issue. In the US, many dairy farms use synthetic growth hormones like RBGH, recombinant bovine growth hormone, to force cows to produce even more milk. This practice has been banned in Europe and Canada due to concerns over its potential health risks, yet it remains legal in the United States. Studies suggest that milk from RBGH-treated cows contains higher levels of insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, a hormone that has been linked to an increased risk of certain cancers. For the cows themselves, life is short. A dairy cow in a factory farm setting typically lasts about 5 years before being considered spent. At that point, she's no longer profitable and is sent to slaughter, her body repurposed for low-grade meat products like ground beef or pet food. In contrast, cows in less intensive environments can live up to 20 years. All of this, the selective breeding, the hormone injections, the rapid milking cycles, exists to keep up with the relentless demand for dairy products, including condensed milk. But the milk that leaves these factory farms is far from ready for consumption. It still has to undergo a series of industrial processes, stripping it of its natural state and transforming it into the thick, sugary product that fills grocery store shelves. So what happens next? Once the milk leaves the farm, it enters a world of high-speed machinery, chemical processing, and corporate control. The journey from raw dairy to condensed milk is anything but simple, and along the way, the final product is altered in ways most consumers never realize. The milk that leaves factory farms doesn't go straight into cans of condensed milk. It first makes a crucial stop at massive industrial processing plants, where fresh dairy is transformed, refined, and altered long before it ever reaches consumers. As the tanker trucks pull up to the facility, they don't just unload raw milk. They unload thousands of gallons of liquid that must first be tested, processed, and manipulated to fit strict industry standards. Every batch is sampled for fat content, protein levels, and the presence of antibiotics. If a sample fails, if it contains too many contaminants or traces of banned substances, it's rejected. But that doesn't mean all harmful elements are caught. Some make it through, diluted within the vast quantities of milk moving through the system. Once inside, the milk is pumped into enormous stainless steel storage tanks, each capable of holding thousands of liters. From here, the transformation begins. The first step? Filtration. Raw milk naturally contains bacteria, white blood cells, and sometimes even pus from infected udders. The industry standard is to filter out these impurities using ultrafine mesh screens, but it's not a perfect process. Tiny particles can still slip through undetectable in the final product. Next, the milk undergoes pasteurization, a process designed to kill harmful bacteria. In traditional pasteurization, the milk is heated to around 72 degrees Celsius, 161 degrees Fahrenheit, for at least 15 seconds before being rapidly cooled. This step eliminates most pathogens, but also destroys some of the milk's natural enzymes, altering its nutritional profile. For condensed milk, however, a more aggressive form of heat treatment is often used. Ultra-high temperature, UHT, processing heats milk to around 135 degrees Celsius, 275 degrees Fahrenheit for a few seconds, ensuring an extended shelf life. This makes the milk more stable for storage, but also affects its taste, texture, and nutritional value. The result? A product that lasts much longer, but at a cost. Many of the milk's natural proteins and beneficial bacteria are destroyed in the process. Then comes homogenization, one of the most controversial steps in modern milk processing. Raw milk naturally contains fat globules that rise to the top, creating a thick layer of cream. Homogenization forces the milk through high-pressure nozzles at speeds of up to 4,000 pounds per square inch, breaking these fat molecules into tiny particles that remain evenly distributed. This process prevents separation, giving the milk a smooth, uniform texture. But some studies suggest that these artificially altered fat molecules behave differently in the human body, potentially impacting digestion and absorption in ways not yet fully understood. At this point, the milk is no longer in its natural state. It has been heated, pressurized, and structurally changed. But it doesn't stop there. Before the milk moves on to the next phase of condensed milk production, some hidden ingredients begin making their way in. Many manufacturers add stabilizers like carrageenan or sodium caseinate, additives designed to improve texture and shelf stability. These compounds may not seem harmful at first glance, but some have been linked to digestive issues and inflammation. Another common addition: synthetic vitamins. Because pasteurization strips milk of many of its natural nutrients, manufacturers often reintroduce artificial versions of vitamins A and D. While this may sound like a benefit, studies show that synthetic vitamins don't always absorb the same way as their natural counterparts. In other words, the milk is fortified, but not necessarily in a way that benefits your body as much as real, whole food sources of these nutrients. By the time the milk has gone through filtration, pasteurization, homogenization, and fortification, it's already far from its original form. But this is only the beginning. The next phase of production takes things even further, concentrating the milk and loading it with sugar to create the thick, syrupy consistency we know as condensed milk. And once sugar enters the equation, things get even more interesting. The journey of condensed milk doesn't stop at simple filtration and pasteurization. There's one key ingredient that completely transforms it: sugar, but not just a little. The amount of sugar added to condensed milk is staggering. It's not just about making it sweet, it's about altering its structure, extending its shelf life, and ensuring that every can lasts for years without refrigeration. But why does it need so much sugar? The answer lies in one simple fact: sugar is one of the most powerful preservatives in the world. When a high concentration of sugar is mixed into milk, it lowers the water activity, meaning bacteria and mold struggle to survive. That's why condensed milk can sit on store shelves for months, even years, without spoiling. But this preservation method comes at a cost. When milk is heated and combined with sugar, something fascinating and a little concerning happens. The proteins inside the milk start breaking down. The lactose, or natural sugar in milk, begins to caramelize. This chemical reaction is known as the Maillard reaction, a process responsible for creating those rich, golden brown flavors we associate with roasted coffee, grilled meat, and, yes, condensed milk. But here's the catch. The Maillard reaction isn't just about flavor, it fundamentally changes the milk. The proteins that once made milk a natural, wholesome drink become altered, twisted, and reshaped into something completely different. Over time, this creates new compounds, some of which have been linked to inflammation and digestive issues. And then there's the sugar itself. In a single can of condensed milk, sugar can make up almost half of the product. That's more sugar per ounce than some sodas. It's why condensed milk is so thick, why it pours in a slow, syrupy stream, and why it sticks to the spoon with an almost unnatural consistency. Food companies argue that sugar is necessary. After all, it's part of what makes condensed milk what it is. But not all sugar is created equal. Some brands use high fructose corn syrup instead of pure cane sugar, a cheaper alternative that has been heavily criticized for its links to obesity and metabolic disorders. Others use stabilizers and emulsifiers to ensure the sugar doesn't crystallize over time. And here's something most people don't realize. That rich, creamy texture you expect from condensed milk, it's not just from the milk itself. Sugar actually thickens the product, creating that velvety consistency. Without sugar, condensed milk would be much thinner, closer to evaporated milk than the thick, sticky product we're familiar with. But there's one final step in the transformation that takes condensed milk from simple sweetened dairy to an industrialized food product. A step that involves high heat, rapid evaporation, and the removal of nearly 2/3 of the milk's natural water content. And that's where the real changes begin. Inside a condensed milk factory, one of the most crucial steps begins, a process that takes ordinary liquid milk and transforms it into the thick, syrupy product found in every can. This is the evaporation stage, where over half of the milk's water content is removed, leaving behind a concentrated, intensely sweet mixture that can last for years without spoiling. But this isn't as simple as just boiling milk down. That would destroy its delicate structure, scorch the sugars, and leave a burnt, unpleasant aftertaste. Instead, industrial-scale vacuum evaporators are used. These high-tech machines create a low-pressure environment, allowing the milk to evaporate at much lower temperatures than normal. The reason? Lower temperatures mean less damage to the milk's proteins and sugars, preserving both flavor and texture. As the milk enters the evaporator, it begins its journey through a series of tall, stainless steel towers. Inside, steam surrounds the milk, gently pulling out moisture while keeping it at a precise temperature, usually between 45 and 65 degrees Celsius. The result? Water starts to leave the milk, thickening it as the remaining liquid becomes more concentrated. But here's where things get interesting. The consistency of condensed milk isn't just about removing water, it's about controlling the chemistry of the milk itself. The proteins, fats, and sugars inside don't simply shrink down in equal proportions. Instead, they begin to interact in new ways. The lactose starts to change, partially caramelizing, deepening the color, and giving condensed milk its signature golden hue. Meanwhile, the fats within the milk begin to form tiny droplets, creating a smooth, almost creamy texture. This is why condensed milk feels so rich on the tongue. It's not just the sugar, but the way the evaporation process alters the milk's natural components. The more precisely this step is controlled, the smoother and more uniform the final product will be. Different countries have their own approaches to this process. In some regions, manufacturers use continuous vacuum evaporators, which allow milk to flow in one end and emerge condensed on the other, making production faster and more efficient. In others, batch evaporation is used, where large amounts of milk are processed in separate cycles to achieve an even thicker result. But no matter where it's made, the goal is the same: to remove just enough water to concentrate the milk while preventing crystallization, clumping, or separation. Too much heat and the sugars burn. Too little, and the milk won't reach the right consistency. And this is where a hidden element of the process comes in: stabilizers. Many brands add small amounts of stabilizing agents to prevent unwanted changes during evaporation. These can include phosphates, carrageenan, or even modified starches, all designed to keep the final product from separating or forming gritty textures over time. By the time the evaporation process is complete, the milk is no longer the fresh, natural liquid that came from the dairy farm. It has been fundamentally transformed, its water removed, its sugars altered, its proteins reshaped. But this is still not the final step. Before it can be sealed inside a can and sent to store shelves, there's one last stage left to complete: homogenization. A process that ensures the milk is perfectly smooth, perfectly blended, and ready to last for years. Condensed milk may seem simple, just milk and sugar, boiled down into a thick, sweet syrup. But what if there was more to it than that? What if the smooth texture, the long shelf life, and the uniform consistency weren't just the result of careful cooking, but of hidden chemical additives designed to manipulate the final product? This is the part that few people think about when they open a can of condensed milk. Yet behind the scenes, an entire industry of food science is at work, ensuring that each can looks, tastes, and feels exactly the same. To do that, manufacturers rely on a cocktail of stabilizers, preservatives, and emulsifiers, substances that are rarely talked about, but are in almost every processed dairy product on the market. One of the most common additives found in condensed milk is dipotassium phosphate. It sounds harmless, but its purpose is to prevent the milk from curdling or forming gritty textures during storage. Without it, the proteins in the milk might react to changes in temperature or acidity, leading to lumps or separation. Food scientists refer to it as a buffering agent. meaning it helps maintain the perfect balance between acidity and alkalinity inside the milk, ensuring that it stays creamy no matter how long it sits on the shelf. Then, there are the emulsifiers. These are the secret weapons used to blend the fat, water, and sugar in condensed milk into a perfectly smooth mixture. Without emulsifiers, the fat content in milk would naturally separate over time, forming an unappetizing layer of oil on top. That's why ingredients like soy lecithin or mono and diglycerides are added. These compounds break down fat molecules into tiny particles, allowing them to stay suspended in the liquid indefinitely. It's the same process used in ice cream, processed cheese, and even commercial chocolate bars, keeping fats and liquids from separating, even under extreme conditions. But emulsifiers do more than just improve texture. Studies have shown that some of these compounds, particularly polysorbates and carboxymethylcellulose, can disrupt gut bacteria and even contribute to inflammation in the digestive system. The very thing that makes condensed milk so perfectly smooth may come at a cost to long-term health. And then there are the preservatives. Condensed milk is already designed to last for years thanks to its high sugar content, which acts as a natural preservative. But for manufacturers, even a small risk of spoilage is unacceptable. That's why some brands add sodium benzoate, a chemical that prevents mold and bacterial growth. It's a compound often found in soft drinks, salad dressings, and processed meats, but it's also been linked to potential health risks, especially when combined with certain artificial colorings. There's another ingredient that many people don't realize is in their condensed milk, carrageenan. Extracted from red seaweed, carrageenan is used to thicken and stabilize dairy products. It gives condensed milk that silky mouthfeel, preventing the sugar and proteins from crystallizing. But some research suggests that degraded forms of carrageenan may trigger inflammation, raising concerns about its long-term effects on digestive health. Despite these additives, food regulations classify condensed milk as a relatively natural product. Most of these ingredients are labeled as generally recognized as safe, GRAS, by the FDA. But what does that really mean? It means that, at some point, these chemicals were deemed safe based on industry-funded studies, many of which haven't been updated in decades. And here's the most surprising part. Not all condensed milk is made the same way. Some countries have stricter food safety laws, banning certain preservatives and additives. In the European Union, for example, several emulsifiers and stabilizers allowed in US condensed milk are either restricted or outright banned due to health concerns. So, what exactly are we consuming? A simple, old-fashioned dairy product, or an industrially engineered version of it, designed for maximum shelf life and perfect consistency? The next time you pick up a can of condensed milk, take a closer look at the label, because what's inside may be far more complex than you think. Condensed milk can sit on a shelf for years without spoiling. No refrigeration, no special handling. Just a thick, sugary syrup packed in a can waiting to be opened. But how is that possible? How can a dairy product, something as perishable as fresh milk, stay perfectly preserved for so long? The answer lies in an intricate combination of food science, industrial processing, and the power of sugar. While many people assume that condensed milk is simply boiled down and thickened, the truth is far more complex. Every step of its production is designed to eliminate bacteria, prevent spoilage, and ensure that it remains fresh for as long as possible. The first line of defense against spoilage is the ultra-processing that condensed milk undergoes. Before it even reaches the can, the milk is pasteurized, heated to high temperatures to destroy harmful bacteria. But that's just the beginning. The real transformation happens during the evaporation process, where over half of the water is removed. This step concentrates the milk's natural sugars and proteins, creating an environment where bacteria struggle to survive. Then comes the sugar, lots of it. Sugar isn't just added for sweetness. It's one of the most powerful preservatives in the food industry. When sugar is dissolved into a liquid at high concentrations, it creates an environment where microbes simply can't grow. This is the same reason why honey, fruit preserves, and syrup have such long shelf lives. In condensed milk, the sugar binds with the remaining water, locking it away and making it unavailable for bacteria or mold to use. But even with these safeguards, condensed milk still needs one more layer of protection: sterilization. Once the thickened, sugar-laden milk is poured into cans, the containers are sealed and undergo a final round of high-temperature treatment. This step ensures that any remaining bacteria are completely destroyed, making it nearly impossible for the product to spoil under normal conditions. That's why an unopened can of condensed milk can sit on a pantry shelf for years without any noticeable changes. But what happens when you open it? Without the airtight seal, exposure to air and moisture creates an opportunity for bacteria to take hold. However, because of its high sugar content, even opened condensed milk can last for weeks in the refrigerator, far longer than fresh milk or cream. Yet, there's a hidden cost to this kind of preservation. While condensed milk may remain edible for years, the process of making it so shelf-stable also strips it of many natural nutrients. The high heat used in processing destroys delicate enzymes and vitamins, reducing the overall nutritional value of the milk. The proteins in the milk undergo structural changes, making them harder for the body to digest. And because of the sheer amount of sugar used, condensed milk becomes more of a confection than a true dairy product. Long shelf life is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it makes food storage easier, reduces waste, and ensures that dairy can be available in regions without reliable refrigeration. On the other, it turns what was once a fresh, nutritious food into something that is highly processed, artificially preserved, and stripped of its original benefits. So, the next time you pick up a can of condensed milk, consider what's really keeping it fresh. It's not just the milk itself, it's the science behind it. A delicate balance of heat, sugar, and sterilization, all working together to create something that can outlast almost any other dairy product. But at what cost? A can of condensed milk looks harmless enough. A simple metal container, tightly sealed, promising sweetness and convenience. But what if that can hold more than just thick, sugary milk? What if, hidden beneath the surface, there were unseen chemicals leaching into your food with every passing day? For decades, food manufacturers have relied on metal packaging to keep products shelf-stable, airtight, and protected from external contamination. But as science advances, a disturbing reality has emerged, one that calls into question just how safe these cans really are. One of the biggest concerns? BPA, bisphenol A. A chemical once widely used in food can linings to prevent corrosion and extend shelf life. For years, consumers had no idea that BPA was silently seeping into their food, entering their bodies with every spoonful. It wasn't until studies linked BPA to hormone disruption, fertility issues, and even cancer that the food industry started facing scrutiny. Countries like Canada and parts of Europe have taken steps to ban BPA in certain food products, especially those targeting infants and children. But in many places, including the United States, BPA is still legally used in food can linings, despite ongoing concerns about its long-term health effects. Some manufacturers claim to have switched to BPA-free alternatives, but research suggests that many of these substitutes may be just as harmful, if not worse. Then there's the issue of aluminum. Many condensed milk cans are lined with a protective coating to prevent the metal from interacting with the food inside. But even with these precautions, small amounts of metal can still make their way into the milk over time. Aluminum exposure has been linked to neurological disorders, including Alzheimer's disease. While food regulators argue that the levels are too low to pose a significant risk, the cumulative effect of repeated exposure remains a troubling unknown. And it doesn't stop there. Heavy metals like lead and cadmium, contaminants that should never be in food, have occasionally been found in trace amounts in some canned goods. These metals don't come from the milk itself, but from the manufacturing process, the storage conditions, and even the way cans are transported. Over time, these toxins can accumulate in the body, leading to a range of health concerns, from kidney damage to developmental issues in children. The scariest part? There's no easy way to tell if your can of condensed milk is contaminated. The exterior looks fine, the product inside tastes the same, but the reality is that metal leaching happens at a microscopic level, slow, invisible, and undetectable without scientific testing. So what can be done? Some consumers have turned to glass jar alternatives, though these are harder to find. Others choose to make homemade condensed milk to avoid the risks associated with industrial packaging. And yet, for most people, the convenience of canned condensed milk outweighs the potential dangers. But should it? Because in the end, this isn't just about a can of milk. It's about the unseen chemicals, the corporate decisions, and the long-term health risks we don't always consider. Every can has a history, and every spoonful contains more than just sweetness. Not all condensed milk is created equal. In fact, some of it isn't even milk at all. You see, when you pick up a can of condensed milk at the store, you expect a rich, creamy product made from pure dairy. But what if that thick, sweet liquid wasn't entirely what you thought it was? What if food manufacturers had found a way to cut corners, replace ingredients, and maximize profits without you ever noticing? This is the reality of the fake dairy problem. Over the past few decades, the demand for condensed milk has skyrocketed. From baking to coffee sweeteners, it has become a staple in households worldwide. But as the cost of real dairy continues to rise, companies have looked for ways to produce condensed milk more cheaply, and that's where the problem begins. Enter filled milk, a product that looks like condensed milk, tastes like condensed milk, but isn't actually condensed milk. Instead of using pure dairy, some brands mix in cheaper vegetable oils, like palm oil or hydrogenated soybean oil, to replace the natural fats found in real milk. The result? A product that's far from what it claims to be. But why does this happen? The answer, as always, comes down to money. Dairy farming is expensive. Cows need to be fed, milked, and cared for. But vegetable oil? It's cheap, easy to produce, and can be sourced in massive quantities at a fraction of the cost. By replacing dairy fats with processed oils, companies can slash production expenses while keeping the same thick, creamy texture consumers expect. The catch? These substitutes are often highly processed and nutritionally inferior. Unlike the natural fats found in dairy, which contain essential nutrients like calcium and vitamin D, hydrogenated oils come with a host of potential health risks, including increased inflammation, higher cholesterol levels, and even links to heart disease. And here's where things get even more deceptive. Many consumers don't realize they're buying fake dairy. The labels don't always make it obvious. Some brands use terms like sweetened creamer instead of condensed milk, or they list vague ingredients like vegetable fat blend without specifying exactly what's inside. In some countries, these products are legally required to be labeled differently, but in others, they're sold right alongside real condensed milk, making it nearly impossible for the average shopper to tell the difference. So how do you know what you're really buying? It starts with reading the ingredients list. True condensed milk should contain just milk and sugar, nothing more. If you see terms like vegetable oil, palm fat, or stabilizers, chances are you're dealing with a modified version. Another giveaway, the price. Fake dairy products are often significantly cheaper than their real counterparts, a warning sign that corners have been cut. But the bigger question is, why is this even allowed? In some countries, strict regulations prevent companies from marketing non-dairy products as milk. But in many others, loopholes and vague labeling laws allow these fake versions to flood the market. And with global food corporations prioritizing profit over transparency, the problem isn't going away anytime soon. For consumers, the choice is clear. If you want real dairy, you have to look beyond the packaging, beyond the marketing claims, and straight into the fine print. Because when it comes to condensed milk, what's inside may not be what you think. Walk into any grocery store and you'll see it sitting on the shelf, sweet, thick, and perfectly preserved. But what if I told you that condensed milk is in far more than just that little can? In fact, this processed dairy product is a hidden ingredient in an astonishing number of mass-produced foods, and unless you're carefully reading labels, you're probably consuming it without even realizing it. Condensed milk is a key component in some of the world's biggest food industries. The bakery sector, candy manufacturers, even processed coffee creamers all rely on it to enhance texture, extend shelf life, and of course, add that signature creamy sweetness. But why? What makes condensed milk so valuable to food manufacturers? The answer lies in its formulation. Unlike fresh milk, which spoils quickly, condensed milk has been processed to remove most of its water content, leaving behind a thick, stable dairy base. It's resistant to bacterial growth, can withstand high temperatures, and has a naturally long shelf life, making it the perfect ingredient for large-scale food production. Take baked goods, for example. From mass-produced cakes to soft cookies, condensed milk plays a crucial role in the texture of these products. Because it contains a high percentage of sugar, it helps retain moisture, preventing items from drying out too quickly. This allows manufacturers to keep their products fresher for longer, without needing to use as many artificial preservatives. And then there's candy. Some of the world's most famous chocolate bars wouldn't exist without condensed milk. Think about that silky, smooth caramel layer in a candy bar. More often than not, it's made using condensed milk as a base. The sugars in the milk caramelize under heat, giving it that rich, golden color and deep, buttery taste. It's a process that candy makers have perfected, using condensed milk to create everything from fudges to toffees to filled chocolates. But perhaps the most unexpected place condensed milk shows up is in coffee creamers. While most people assume these creamers are made from real dairy, many contain a combination of condensed milk, vegetable oils, and artificial flavors. The result? A thick, shelf-stable product that mimics real cream, but without the need for refrigeration. It's why these creamers can sit on store shelves for months, even years, without spoiling. Yet, condensed milk doesn't stop there. It's found in a shocking number of processed foods, from ice creams to instant oatmeal to prepackaged pancakes. Some frozen desserts like soft-serve ice cream use condensed milk as a base to create a smoother, more consistent texture. Even some healthy protein bars rely on condensed milk as a binding agent, helping hold ingredients together while adding a touch of sweetness. The bigger question is, why don't food companies highlight this on the packaging? The answer, of course, comes down to marketing. While consumers might feel nostalgic about homemade desserts made with condensed milk, they likely don't expect to find it in their store-bought breakfast foods or candy bars. By listing it under vague terms like milk solids or dairy ingredients, manufacturers can include it without drawing too much attention. So, the next time you pick up a packaged snack, a bakery treat, or even a cup of coffee from a vending machine, take a closer look at the ingredients. You might just be surprised at how much condensed milk is hiding in the foods you eat every day. Condensed milk might seem like a simple, harmless product, just milk and sugar, thickened into a syrupy consistency. But depending on where you are in the world, that can of condensed milk on the shelf may contain very different ingredients. The international food market is anything but uniform, and when it comes to food safety regulations, some countries take a much stricter approach than others. Take the European Union, for example. In many EU nations, condensed milk must meet higher standards for purity and safety. That means no questionable additives, no excessive processing aids, and certainly no banned substances that have been linked to health risks. The use of certain preservatives, artificial emulsifiers, and even packaging materials is highly restricted, ensuring that the product you're buying is as close to its natural form as possible. Now, contrast that with the United States. Here, condensed milk manufacturers have far more freedom when it comes to what they can add. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, allows a wide range of additives to be used in food production, including some that have been banned in other countries. Many American brands use stabilizers like carrageenan and sodium caseinate, which are not necessarily harmful in small amounts, but have been linked to digestive issues and inflammatory reactions. Meanwhile, some brands even use modified milk ingredients, which can include anything from powdered dairy byproducts to synthetic flavor enhancers. But it's not just about what's inside the can, it's also about how it's packaged. In the US, most condensed milk is sold in traditional tin cans, many of which are lined with BPA-based materials. BPA, or bisphenol A, is a chemical commonly used in food can linings to prevent corrosion. The problem? Studies have shown that BPA can leach into food, especially in products that are acidic or heat processed, like condensed milk. This has led to bans and restrictions in places like the European Union and Canada, where food safety agencies have deemed BPA exposure too risky for consumers. Some brands of condensed milk that are perfectly legal in the US are outright banned in other countries. Why? Because they contain additives or processing agents that don't meet stricter international standards. For example, some manufacturers in the US use artificial thickeners to achieve that rich texture without relying solely on milk solids and sugar. These additives may be considered safe by American regulators, but are flagged as unnecessary or even hazardous in places like Japan and parts of Europe. Then there's the issue of dairy quality itself. In countries with strong dairy regulations, like Germany and Switzerland, condensed milk must come from high-quality milk sources, with strict rules on antibiotic use and hormone treatments. Meanwhile, in the US, cows treated with growth hormones like RBGH, recombinant bovine growth hormone, can still be used in condensed milk production, despite concerns over its potential effects on human health. The European Union banned RBGH in 1999, citing both animal welfare and health concerns, but the US continues to allow it. So, depending on where you are in the world, that simple can of condensed milk could be made from pure, high-quality dairy, or it could be a processed mixture packed with additives and questionable substances. The scary part? Most consumers don't even realize these differences exist. They assume that because condensed milk is a traditional, well-known product, it must be the same everywhere. But in reality, where you live determines what's inside your food and whether or not you're consuming ingredients that other countries have deemed too risky to allow. Next time you pick up a can, take a closer look at where it comes from. Because in some countries, condensed milk is just milk and sugar, and in others, it's a chemical cocktail hiding behind a familiar label. The condensed milk industry is more than just a simple product, it's a billion-dollar empire. What started as a necessity for food preservation has evolved into one of the most profitable sectors in the dairy world, controlled by a handful of powerful corporations. But how did condensed milk become such a staple in kitchens worldwide? And more importantly, who is really benefiting from its success? The answer lies in the long history of strategic marketing, mass production, and a carefully crafted public perception. Condensed milk was originally created as a solution to a serious problem, food spoilage. In the 19th century, refrigeration was non-existent, and fresh milk spoiled within hours. But once Bordon developed a way to remove the water content from milk and extend its shelf life, everything changed. Suddenly, milk could be stored for months, even years, without refrigeration. This breakthrough didn't just solve a household problem, it opened the door to a new business model. Fast forward to today, and condensed milk is one of the biggest revenue drivers in the dairy industry. Major corporations like Nestlé, Friesland-Campana, and Fonterra dominate the global market, producing millions of cans each year. Nestlé in particular is a key player, owning brands that distribute condensed milk across multiple continents. Their presence is so vast that in some countries, condensed milk is almost synonymous with Nestlé, cementing its grip on both the product and the narrative around it. But here's where things get interesting. Over the decades, condensed milk has been marketed not just as a convenient ingredient, but as a nutritional essential. In many parts of the world, especially in developing nations, condensed milk is aggressively promoted as a healthy addition to a child's diet. Advertisements show strong, happy children drinking milk-based products, reinforcing the idea that condensed milk is just as nutritious as fresh milk. The reality? While condensed milk does retain some of its original nutrients, it's loaded with added sugars, making it far from a health food. In fact, some brands contain up to 50% sugar, more sugar per serving than some soft drinks. Yet, clever branding ensures that people associate it with wholesome dairy goodness rather than the processed, sugary product it actually is. And that's the key to the industry's success. By capitalizing on nostalgia and trust, these corporations have secured their place in the market for generations. Many families around the world grew up with condensed milk, using it in coffee, desserts, and even as a direct substitute for fresh milk. It's a staple that feels familiar, comforting, and that's exactly what the industry wants. Beyond just marketing, big dairy corporations also influence policies and regulations that protect their profits. In many countries, government subsidies help keep dairy prices low, making products like condensed milk affordable for the masses. Meanwhile, lobbying efforts ensure that regulatory bodies remain lenient when it comes to labeling laws and ingredient disclosures. This allows brands to continue selling condensed milk under the guise of being a wholesome, dairy-based product, even when some versions barely contain real milk at all. The condensed milk industry is a perfect example of how a simple product can turn into a global empire. It's not just about selling milk, it's about controlling a market, shaping consumer perception, and maximizing profits. Most people never question what's in their condensed milk or who's behind it, and that's exactly the way the industry wants it. For those who love the taste of condensed milk but worry about its high sugar content and questionable additives, the big question remains: are there any healthy alternatives? The answer isn't as straightforward as you might think. While the traditional version dominates supermarket shelves, a growing demand for cleaner, healthier options has led to a surge in organic, plant-based, and homemade alternatives. But are they really any better? Or are they just another marketing trick designed to make consumers feel like they're making a healthier choice? One of the most talked about alternatives is organic condensed milk. Unlike conventional brands, organic versions are made from milk, sourced from cows that aren't treated with artificial growth hormones or antibiotics. The cows are typically pasture-raised, meaning they graze on grass, rather than being fed a diet of processed grain and soy. In theory, this should result in a cleaner, more natural product. But there's a catch. Organic condensed milk is still just as high in sugar as the regular version. The main difference is that it doesn't contain synthetic additives or preservatives. So, while it may be a slightly better choice for those trying to avoid artificial ingredients, it doesn't necessarily solve the issue of excess sugar consumption. Then, there's the plant-based movement. With more people looking for dairy-free options, brands have started rolling out coconut, oat, and almond-based condensed milks. These alternatives mimic the creamy texture of traditional condensed milk, but instead of dairy, they use plant-based fats and natural sweeteners. Coconut condensed milk, for example, is a popular choice for vegans and those with dairy allergies. It offers a rich, slightly tropical flavor and contains healthy medium-chain triglycerides, MCTs, which can provide an energy boost. However, just like its dairy counterpart, it's often packed with sugar to achieve that thick, syrupy consistency. Some brands use alternative sweeteners like agave or date syrup, but the sugar content remains high in most cases. For those looking to cut back on sugar without giving up condensed milk entirely, the best option might be making it at home. A homemade version allows full control over the ingredients, meaning you can reduce the sugar, skip the preservatives, and even experiment with natural sweeteners like honey or maple syrup. The process is surprisingly simple. Just simmer milk with a small amount of sweetener until it thickens. For a dairy-free version, coconut milk works beautifully, creating a naturally sweet, creamy alternative that pairs well with coffee and desserts. But for those unwilling to give up store-bought convenience, moderation is key. One way to enjoy condensed milk without overloading on sugar is to dilute it with regular milk or use it sparingly as a sweetener rather than a main ingredient. A small drizzle in coffee or a teaspoon in a homemade dessert can satisfy cravings without the need for large quantities. At the end of the day, while healthier alternatives exist, they don't eliminate the fundamental issue. Condensed milk, whether dairy-based or plant-based, is a concentrated form of sugar and fat. The healthiest way to consume it isn't necessarily finding an alternative, but learning to enjoy it in moderation. The food industry thrives on making people believe they need replacements for everything, but sometimes the best approach is simply to consume less of the original. The future of condensed milk is shifting in ways most people never expected. For over a century, this thick, syrupy dairy product has remained relatively unchanged, a staple in desserts, coffee, and processed foods. But as food science advances and consumer preferences evolve, the condensed milk of tomorrow may look very different from what we know today. With new technology emerging in milk processing, the rise of lab-grown dairy, and an increasing demand for plant-based alternatives, the industry is at a crossroads. Will traditional condensed milk continue to dominate, or is it on the verge of a major transformation? One of the biggest changes on the horizon is the evolution of milk processing itself. Traditional dairy production relies on mass farming, mechanical milking, and industrial-scale evaporation to produce condensed milk. But scientists are now exploring more efficient, sustainable ways to create dairy products. Precision fermentation, for example, uses microorganisms like yeast or bacteria to produce dairy proteins without the need for cows at all. This technology has already led to the creation of synthetic dairy proteins that mimic real milk in both taste and texture. If fully developed, it could eliminate the need for large-scale dairy farms altogether, reducing the environmental impact of milk production while maintaining the flavor and consistency consumers expect. Then, there's the growing conversation around lab-grown milk. While lab-grown meat has dominated headlines in recent years, dairy is following closely behind. Instead of raising cows, scientists are working on cultivating milk-producing cells in a controlled environment. creating a product that is molecularly identical to cow's milk, without the ethical and environmental concerns of traditional farming. If successful, this technology could completely disrupt the dairy industry, making conventional milk production obsolete. But the question remains, would consumers accept it? Just as many remain skeptical of lab-grown meat, people may hesitate to embrace synthetic milk, especially in a product as nostalgic and traditional as condensed milk. Meanwhile, the demand for dairy-free alternatives continues to rise. Once a niche market, plant-based condensed milk has become a fast-growing segment in grocery stores worldwide. Brands are experimenting with cashew, oat, soy, and even pea-based milks to create dairy-free versions of condensed milk that still offer the rich, creamy consistency of the original. Some of these alternatives boast lower environmental footprints and healthier fat profiles, appealing to those looking to reduce their reliance on traditional dairy. But just like conventional condensed milk, many of these plant-based options still contain high amounts of sugar, meaning they may not be as healthy as they seem. Ultimately, the future of condensed milk will likely be shaped by consumer demand. As people become more conscious of what they eat, companies will be forced to adapt, whether that means reformulating recipes, reducing sugar, or introducing entirely new, dairy-free or lab-grown options. What remains to be seen is whether these innovations will truly replace the classic version or simply coexist alongside it. The one thing that's certain, the condensed milk industry is no longer as simple as it once was. What started as a solution for food preservation has now become a battleground for sustainability, nutrition, and technological advancement. Whether the next generation of condensed milk comes from cows, plants, or a petri dish, one thing is clear: change is coming. Condensed milk has been a staple in kitchens around the world for generations. It's rich, creamy, and packed with sweetness, making it a key ingredient in everything from coffee to desserts. But after uncovering the truth behind how it's made, the hidden additives, and the industrial dairy practices behind it, one big question remains. Should you stop eating condensed milk, or is there still a place for it in a balanced diet? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. Like most processed foods, condensed milk comes with both benefits and risks. On one hand, it has an impressively long shelf life, making it convenient for storage in emergencies. It's also an essential ingredient in many beloved recipes, giving desserts and beverages their signature richness. In small amounts, it can add flavor and texture to dishes without posing significant harm. For some, especially those with limited access to fresh dairy, it remains a reliable source of milk-based nutrition. But on the other hand, the dangers of condensed milk can't be ignored. The extreme sugar content alone is enough to raise concerns. Just 1 tablespoon contains more sugar than some candy bars. Consuming too much sugar over time can lead to obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disorders. And since condensed milk is often added to already sugary foods, the risk of overconsumption is high. Beyond the sugar issue, there are also concerns about the quality of dairy used in mass production. Industrial farming practices raise ethical and health-related red flags, from hormone-treated cows to the presence of antibiotic residues in milk. Many brands also include additives, stabilizers, and emulsifiers that some experts warn could disrupt digestion and gut health. And then there's the packaging. Many condensed milk cans contain BPA, a chemical linked to hormone disruption and other health risks. While some companies have moved away from BPA-lined cans, others continue to use them, especially in countries with looser regulations. So, is there a way to enjoy condensed milk safely? The key lies in moderation and awareness. If you choose to consume it, opt for brands with cleaner ingredient lists, ones that use real milk, without fillers or unnecessary additives. Check for organic or BPA-free options, and be mindful of how much you're using. Instead of drowning your coffee in it, or making condensed milk-based treats a daily habit, reserve it for occasional indulgences. There's also the option of making your own condensed milk at home. By simmering fresh milk with a natural sweetener, you can create a version without the industrial processing, preservatives, or questionable ingredients. Plant-based condensed milk alternatives are also growing in popularity, but they come with their own concerns. Some are still loaded with sugar, and others rely on artificial thickeners to replicate dairy's creaminess. At the end of the day, the real danger of condensed milk isn't just what's inside the can. It's how unaware most consumers are about what they're actually eating. The marketing, the nostalgia, and the convenience all play a role in making it seem harmless. But now, you know the truth. The question is, what will you do with it? The choice is yours. But before you open your next can of condensed milk, ask yourself, do you really know what's inside? And is it worth it?